Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's, well, it's incredibly common, deeply painful, and honestly almost entirely wrapped in silence. We're talking about the psychology of family estrangement. Look, my goal here is absolutely not to judge. Instead, we're going to unpack the psychology behind why people make what is arguably one of the hardest decisions of their entire lives. We'll look past the societal judgment, dig into the actual mechanics of why families break apart, and hopefully gain some profound empathy along the way. So let's just get right into it. Section 1. The unseen Thanksgiving table, a silent choice. Okay, so I want you to picture this. You're sitting at a really loud, messy Thanksgiving table. Maybe it's your friend's family or your partner's. People are, bickering over something totally silly, laughing, passing the mashed potatoes. And as you're sitting there, just watching this ordinary, everyday family chaos unfold, this heavy realization washes over you. You realize you no longer have this dynamic. And it wasn't an accident. It was a choice you made, and you're the one sitting there with the sheer weight of it. Now, imagine the exact split second someone from across the table, right between passing the stuffing and making awkward small talk, casually looks at you and asks, "So, where's your family?" In that very moment, you're forced into a deeply, deeply uncomfortable decision. Do you tell the complicated, messy truth to someone who, let's be honest, probably just wanted to make polite conversation? Almost universally, the response is just simple deflection. You say something like, "Oh, they couldn't make it." Just something totally vague to help everyone move on. Because, well, the real answer takes way too long to explain, and frankly, it just makes people uncomfortable. So you smile, you deflect. But internally, you're silently hiding the massive weight of a choice. A choice that society, without even getting the full story, almost always assumes is somehow your fault. Which brings us to Section 2, the myth of giving up and our cultural expectations. This is where the psychology gets incredibly fascinating, because our cultural expectations and the psychological reality, they are completely at odds with one another. Think about it. We have built entire cultures around phrases like blood is thicker than water. We literally have this nearly religious reverence for unconditional family love. And because of this deeply ingrained idea that family love is, the purest kind of love, people just automatically assume that anyone who walks away from it must be selfish, or dramatic, or incredibly ungrateful. The baseline assumption is just that they threw in the towel at the very first sign of trouble. But when we look at society's assumption versus the reality, wow. The people who cut off their families absolutely did not give up easily. In fact, our sources point out that they're almost always the ones who tried the longest. They're the ones who spent their 20s driving 3 hours every single holiday, feeling completely unseen, just desperately hoping things would change. They didn't give up. They just finally realized they had carried enough. Moving on to Section 3, erosion, not explosion. Let's look at Dr. Pillemer's research. To really understand how these relationships actually break down, we have to look at the fascinating data from Dr. Carl Pillemer at Cornell University. He literally spent years studying family estrangement, and what his data reveals goes against almost everything we naturally assume about broken families. See, Dr. Pillemer's studies show that family estrangement is rarely one big, dramatic explosion. Instead, it happens in stages. First, it starts with years of conversations that go absolutely nowhere. Second, the exact same behaviors repeat over and over, and apologies never come. And finally, step 3. One day, it just stops making sense to keep trying. The cost of staying simply becomes higher than the cost of leaving. It's not a sudden snap. It's a long, slow falling apart after years of trying and hoping. So let's get into Section 4, the drip of invalidation and why the floor rots. What actually brings individuals to that breaking point where the cost of staying is just too high? Well, it all comes down to emotional invalidation. That's when the people who are supposed to make you feel safe consistently dismiss what you feel. Researchers pinpoint this as a profoundly toxic pattern because over time, it fundamentally changes how you see yourself. When your reality is constantly denied, you actually begin to feel that your own needs are an inconvenience, and it actively changes how safe you think it is to need anything from anyone at all. It's like drip, drip, drip. Emotional invalidation isn't a massive hurricane. It's that quiet, steady feeling that you are never quite enough, and that love in your family always comes with conditions. Think of it exactly like the slow drip of a ceiling leak. Day by day, it doesn't seem like a disaster, right? There's no obvious crime scene. But eventually, that relentless, slow drip completely rots the wood and takes out the entire floor. The foundation just gives way. And that brings us to Section 5, Grief, Guilt, and Relief, the aftermath. What actually happens after the floor gives way? Well, even when walking away is absolutely necessary for someone's mental and emotional survival, the aftermath is incredibly complex. It's definitely not a celebration, it's a deeply, deeply misunderstood psychological state. Estranged individuals usually cycle through three distinct experiences. First, they continuously mourn the bond they never had, the normal family dynamic they see everywhere else. Second, they grapple with intense guilt, constantly wondering if they should have tried harder. But psychology tells us that this guilt is actually proof that they cared deeply, their love just lacked a safe place to land. And third, despite all the grief and the guilt, they ultimately discover profound relief. For the very first time in their lives, the noise stops. They can actually hear their own thoughts without carrying that immense, heavy burden. Section 6. Choosing self-preservation and choosing one pain. Ultimately, what this explainer demonstrates is that cutting off family is never, ever the easy way out. There is no easy way out in these situations. It is fundamentally about choosing one kind of pain over another. Eventually, estranged individuals have to face a really hard truth: the difference between love and a deal. A relationship built entirely on resentment, strict obligation, and constant performance, where you feel like you always have to earn your right to belong, guys, that isn't love. It's a transaction. It's a deal. And from a psychological perspective, some deals simply need to end before both people can actually heal and move forward. And the absolutely crucial takeaway from all this research is pretty simple. Surviving isn't noble. It's just surviving. There are people who spend years literally making themselves smaller to fit inside a family that is way too small for who they actually are. And they're told that's loyalty. But it isn't. The people who cut off their families aren't cold. They are people who loved desperately, but eventually had to choose between that love and themselves. You are allowed to want more than just survival. So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this deeply personal question to reflect on. Are you surviving or are you thriving? Take a moment to genuinely think about the nature and the health of your own closest relationships. Think about the environments where you thrive versus the ones where you're simply enduring that slow drip. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep analyzing the world around you. Please keep taking care of your mental health, and I'll see you on the next one.